Jordan Wells was 38 years old, and until that afternoon, he believed his marriage was the one thing in his life he hadn't had to build alone. He had built everything else quietly. 9 properties on a single South Side street, held under companies with names nobody connected to him, managed by people who understood that his greatest advantage was invisibility. His in-laws thought he was a project manager who got lucky marrying their daughter. His wife had never asked too many questions. That suited him fine. Then he came home early one Tuesday and heard his brother-in-law in his living room, on the phone, describing the square footage of Jordan's house to a developer, calling Jordan a tenant situation they would handle. 3 days later, Jordan's wife sat beside her mother at his kitchen table and listened while Beverly Croft told him, calmly and without apology, that it was time for him to go. They smiled like they were doing him a favor, like the decision was already made and Jordan had no say in any of it. Jordan looked around the room slowly, said nothing, and stood up. What happened next? None of them saw coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The groceries were heavy. Jordan Wells carried them up the front steps of the Callaway Avenue house with both arms full, 2 paper bags from the market on 5th, 1 plastic bag looped around his wrist with a bunch of collard greens poking out the top. He had stopped for the good olive oil Beverly liked. He had remembered the sweet potatoes, even though they weren't on the list. He had been careful with the eggs. He pushed through the front door with his shoulder. The kitchen was already hers. Beverly Croft moved through the space the way a general moves through occupied territory, with complete ownership, no hesitation, no acknowledgement that anyone else had ever cooked there. She had rearranged the counter before Jordan even set the bags down. Her apron was already tied. The smell of browning onions had already settled into every corner of the room. "You got the right cream?" she said, not turning around. "Yes, ma'am." Jordan set the bags down on the island. "Heavy cream. 2 pints. Good." She finally looked over her shoulder, gave him a short nod that meant "You may leave now." Jordan unloaded the bags without being asked. By the time everyone sat down, the table looked the way Beverly wanted it to look. The serving dishes were full. The lighting was warm. Diane sat across from her mother, and Preston sat at the far end with the loose, wide posture of a man who believed every room was his living room. "So, Jordan." Preston reached for the bread before the blessing. "How's the construction life? You guys pour any concrete this week?" Jordan passed the bread basket back to him. "Project management, actually. But yeah, solid week." Right. Preston tore off a piece. "Project management." He said it the way you say, "A kid's drawing is interesting." "That's like, you keep the schedule?" "Something like that." Preston looked at Diane with a little smile. Diane looked at her plate. She reached for her glass. She didn't say anything. Jordan watched her not say anything. He took a sip of water. He was warm through every single moment of it, nodded when spoken to, laughed when the timing called for it, answered every question without a trace of edge. He was good at this. He had been doing it for years. "The house is looking well kept," Beverly said at some point, dropping it into the conversation without preamble. She meant it as a compliment, the way a landlord compliments a tenant for not ruining the carpet. "I've always made sure Diane had something solid under her feet. Even when the choices were." She paused and let the pause do the work. "Not necessarily what I would have chosen." Jordan smiled. "Diane's lucky to have you, Beverly." Beverly accepted this as simply true. He refilled her water glass. Dinner moved the way Sunday dinners always moved in this house. Preston talked about a deal that was almost closed, a building that was almost his, an opportunity that was practically already done. Beverly listened to Preston the way mothers listen to sons, with the kind of faith that doesn't require evidence. Diane was quieter than usual. She ate most of her food. She laughed at the right moments. But there was something measured about her, something that had been measured for a long time, like a door that had been gently, gradually swinging shut. Jordan noticed it the way he noticed everything, without reacting, without naming it out loud. He just filed it away, added it to the folder he kept behind his eyes. After dessert, after Beverly wrapped up the leftovers she would take home, after Preston's car pulled out of the driveway and the dishes were done, Diane said she was tired and went upstairs early. Jordan tidied the kitchen. He wiped the counter down. He turned off the light over the stove. Then he saw the coat. Diane's coat was draped over the back of the chair by the door, the way she always left it. He picked it up to hang it properly. Something slid in the pocket. He reached in. A business card. White. Clean. Good card stock. The kind that cost money. The name was printed in small, confident letters. Victor Ashby. Principal. Ashby Development Group. Below the name, a phone number and a website. Nothing else. No handwriting on the back. No note. Jordan stood in the hallway and looked at it. He thought about the weight of the card in his fingers. He thought about the way Diane had been quiet all through dinner. He thought about Preston's smile when she looked at her plate. He set the card back on the counter. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up and slid it back into the exact pocket where he'd found it. Same depth. Same angle. He hung the coat on the hook by the door. He went upstairs. Diane was already asleep. Or she was doing a very good impression of. Jordan changed quietly. He lay down. He looked at the ceiling. He didn't say a word. Morning came in gray and quiet. Jordan was already awake when Diane's alarm went off at 6:15. He heard her move through the routine. Shower running, closet door sliding open, the particular sound of her heels on the hardwood. He lay still and listened to all of it. When she came to the doorway of the bedroom, dressed and ready, he was sitting up. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." He smiled at her. "Busy week starting." She nodded, adjusted the strap of her bag. "I'll probably be late tonight. I have that client thing." "Okay," he said it easily. "I'll figure out dinner." She left, without kissing him. Not dramatically. There was no door slam, no coldness that announced itself. She simply didn't cross the room. She waved once from the doorway, and her heels clicked down the stairs, and then the front door closed behind her. Jordan sat in the quiet for a moment. Then he got up. He found the coat where he'd hung it the night before. He reached into the pocket and pulled the card out again. Careful. 2 fingers, like it was something fragile. In the gray morning light, the printing was even cleaner than he remembered. Victor Ashby, Principal. Ashby Development Group. He took a photo with his phone, front of the card. Then he turned it over, photographed the blank back, and returned it to the coat pocket. Same depth, same angle. He straightened the coat on the hook. Then he sat at the kitchen table with his coffee and opened his laptop. Victor Ashby was not hard to find. He had a clean website, the kind that said boutique without saying it, all white space and architectural photography and language about transformative community investment. He had a LinkedIn with 300 connections and the kind of profile that listed accomplishments in the passive voice, like the deals had simply happened near him. He had been quoted in 2 trade publications in the last 18 months, both times in articles about opportunity zones and Southside redevelopment. Both articles mentioned Callaway Avenue by name. Jordan read every word. He did not rush. He finished his coffee. He read it again. Then he picked up his phone and called Andre. Andre answered on the second ring, the way he always did, like he had been expecting the call, which he usually had. "You're up early," Andre said. Diane left a business card in her coat pocket. Jordan kept his voice level. "Victor Ashby, Ashby Development Group." A short pause. "Ashby. Yeah, I know that name. He's been moving on Southside properties. What's the context?" "That's what I'd like to know." Jordan looked out the kitchen window at the quiet street. "I'm not saying anything yet about what it means, but he's active on Callaway. He was quoted in 2 pieces about this specific block. And his card is in my wife's coat. You think she knows him professionally? She's never mentioned him. Another pause, this one longer. Andre was thinking, which meant he was already working. I'll run a quiet search, Andre said. Ashby, his firm, any shell activity or acquisition filings in the Callaway corridor? Give me until tonight. Just a background search for now, Jordan said. I want to know what he's been touching. Understood. Andre's voice carried no drama. That was one of the things Jordan had always valued about him. He didn't perform concern, he just responded to it. I'll call you when I have something. Jordan said thank you, and ended the call. That afternoon he drove to Callaway. He had a standing check-in with Claudette every other week. Had for years. Today wasn't the scheduled day, but he texted her that morning and she replied within 4 minutes. Here till 5. Come by. Claudette ran her operation out of the second floor of one of the mixed-use buildings mid-block. Her office was small and precise, every file in its place. A whiteboard on the wall covered in property codes and maintenance schedules. She had a cup of tea going when Jordan came in and did not offer him one, which was how he knew she was busy. Walk me through anything new on the block, he said, taking the chair across from her desk. Claudette pulled up her screen. Unit 4B has a slow drain. I've got a plumber scheduled for Thursday. The retail space at 114 renewed. They signed a 2-year. Parking structure had a light out. That's fixed, she scrolled. And there were some inquiries. Jordan kept his face easy. What kind of inquiries? Informal ones. Email, mostly. Asking about availability, not on individual units, but on whole properties. A couple of addresses on the block. She turned the screen slightly toward him. 3 separate emails from the same domain. Ashby Development Group. Jordan looked at the emails on her screen without touching anything. Did they identify a specific interest? He asked. General acquisition interest, nothing formal. They asked about 112, 118. She paused. And the house. Jordan nodded slowly. He did not change his expression. When did these come in? Oldest one is about 4 months back, Claudette said. Most recent was 6 weeks ago. Okay. He stood. Hold on to those. Don't respond if more come in. Already wasn't, she said. He drove home slowly. The streets of Callaway slid past his windows, the coffee shop, the salon, the parking structure, the house, and he saw all of it differently now. Not because anything had changed. Everything was exactly as it had always been. Every building still belonged to him, quietly and completely, the way it had for years. But someone had been asking about it, and that someone's card had been in his wife's pocket. Jordan turned the corner onto the block and parked. He sat in the car with the engine off, and the street quiet around him. He did not reach for his phone. He did not call Andre back. He did not go inside yet. He looked at the house. He had been watching his whole life. He was good at it. He would watch a little longer. The water main broke 2 blocks over on a Thursday. Jordan got the call just after noon. One of Claudette's maintenance contacts flagging a pressure issue that was already starting to affect the building at 114. He wrapped up early, left the office, and drove toward Callaway. He turned onto the block and saw Preston's car. A white Audi, parked halfway up the driveway like Preston owned the driveway too. Jordan recognized the small dent on the rear bumper from a parking garage incident Preston had described at dinner 6 months ago, laughing about it like it was somebody else's fault. Jordan pulled to the curb half a block down. He sat for a moment, just breathing. Then he got out, walked to the front door, and used his key. The house was quiet at first. Jordan stepped inside and eased the door shut behind him. He set his bag down on the entry table without making a sound. Then he heard Preston's voice from the living room. Yeah, the original hardwood is throughout the main floor. They don't put that in anymore. A short laugh. No, the kitchen's been updated. Full gut renovation maybe 4 or 5 years back. It's a good property. Jordan stood in the hallway and listened. Square footage is just under 1,800. 3-bed, 2-bath. The lot's got some depth, too. There's room to work with if your guys want to think about density. Preston was pacing. Jordan could hear the slow footsteps, back and forth. The way Preston moved when he was performing confidence for an audience he couldn't see. The deed situation is clean. My mother's name is attached to the property, and she's on board. Full authorization. A pause. The tenant situation. Yeah, we'll handle that. He's not going to be a problem. He's basically a... He'll be fine. We'll give him time. He's basically a... Preston didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jordan stayed where he was. He did not move toward the living room. He did not speak. He stood in the narrow hallway with the afternoon light coming in sideways through the transom window above the door, and he let Preston finish the entire call. Preston wrapped it up with a promise to send square footage documentation and preliminary comps. He said he could have something over by the end of the week. He said he was looking forward to making something happen on this block. Then he hung up. Jordan waited 3 full seconds. Then he stepped into the doorway of the living room. Preston turned around. For one moment, the man had no expression at all. Then the machinery kicked in. The easy smile, the relaxed shoulders, the hands that came up in a casual, nothing-to-see-here gesture. "Jay, didn't hear you come in, man." He shook his head like he was amused by his own surprise. "Diane said I could grab that slow cooker she borrowed. You know how Beverly gets." Jordan leaned against the doorframe. His voice was even. "Didn't see her text me about that." Probably forgot. Preston was already moving toward the kitchen, comfortable as a man in a house that he believed would shortly be his family's concern. "You need anything while I'm here? You good?" "I'm good," Jordan said. Preston found the slow cooker in the cabinet beneath the island. He tucked it under his arm and said something about seeing Jordan at the next Sunday dinner, made a joke about the water main issue Jordan hadn't mentioned out loud, which meant Diane had told him Jordan was coming home early, which meant some version of this visit had been planned. And then he was gone. The front door closed. Jordan stood in the kitchen. He looked at the cabinet Preston had opened, at the clean counter, at the afternoon light on the hardwood floor that Preston had just described to a developer like a line item on a sales sheet. He pulled out a chair and sat down at the table. Then he called Andre. "I need you to pull the full ownership records on Callaway Avenue," Jordan said. "Every property, all 9. "I know what you own," Andre said. "I know you do. I need to know what my wife thinks she's inheriting." Andre was quiet for a moment. "Give me an hour." It took 40 minutes. Jordan opened the email at the kitchen table and laid out the records. LLC registrations, title documents, transfer histories. He had created all of it. He had signed every document, structured every holding company, made every quiet decision over the better part of a decade. Looking at it now was not a discovery. It was a reminder. But then Andre's second email arrived. Cross-referencing property inquiry history with the LOI I found filed through Ashby Development. Diane's name is on it. Read the attachment. Jordan opened the attachment. It was a letter of intent, 2 pages, prepared on Ashby Development Group letterhead. The language affirmed that the property at the Callaway address was understood to be held under the Croft Family Trust, and authorized Ashby Development Group to begin preliminary sale negotiations on the family's behalf. At the bottom of the second page was a signature line, Diane Marie Wells, dated 4 months ago. Jordan looked at her signature for a long time. He knew her handwriting. The slight backward lean of the D, the way she looped the E at the end of her name. He had seen that handwriting on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the occasional note left on the counter when she got home before him. He knew it completely. He closed the laptop. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the afternoon was starting to go gray, the light flattening out the way it did before rain. Jordan sat with his hands flat on the table and did not move for almost 2 minutes. Then he picked up his phone and called Claudette. "Pull all active lease agreements on Callaway," he said. "Every single one. And I need you to find out who the Croft family's real estate attorney is." Claudette didn't ask why. She said, "You want me to start the clock?" Jordan said, "Start the clock." Diane came home just after 7. Jordan was in the kitchen when he heard her key in the lock. He was making rice. Simple enough. Just something to do with his hands while he waited for the day to finish. He heard her set her bag down in the entryway, heard the soft click of her heels on the hardwood as she moved toward the kitchen. "Hey." She leaned against the doorframe. She looked tired. Or something close to tired. The kind of expression a person wears when they are carrying something they have not yet decided how to put down. "Hey," Jordan said. He kept his eyes on the pot. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the counter. She talked for a few minutes about her day, something about a difficult client, something about traffic on the expressway. Jordan listened and responded in the right places and stirred the rice. Then she said, "My mom wants to do a family thing this weekend. At the house." Jordan turned the burner down. "Yeah? Just dinner. You know how she is." Diane set her glass down. "Saturday afternoon." "Sure," Jordan said. "That works." She looked at him for just a moment, almost like she was searching for something in his face. Whatever she was looking for, she didn't find it. Or maybe she found nothing, which was the same thing. "Okay," she said. "Good." She went upstairs to change. Jordan stood at the stove and looked at the steam rising from the pot. Saturday came gray and cold. The kind of November afternoon where the sky sits low and flat, and the light never really arrives. Jordan dressed the same way he dressed for every Sunday dinner. Clean, simple, unremarkable. He drove to the house. He arrived on time. Beverly was already there. So was Preston. The dining room table had been set, but not for eating. The good dishes were out, but the food was secondary. Something from a catering tray Beverly had arranged on the sideboard. The table itself had been cleared to make room for the meeting. It felt like a boardroom dressed up to look like a family dinner. The effort was visible. Beverly sat at the head of the table. Preston sat to her left, with a manila folder in front of him, his hands resting on top of it, the way a man rests his hands on something he wants you to notice. Diane sat beside her mother. Jordan sat across from them and folded his hands on the table. Beverly began. She spoke slowly and with great care, the way someone speaks when they have rehearsed. She said she had always respected Jordan. She said she had always believed he was a decent man. She said that a mother's job, her whole job, her entire purpose, was to make sure her daughter had the life she deserved. And she had watched for 6 years, quietly, out of love for both of them, as Jordan held Diane in a life that was smaller than what Diane was meant for. "Some people are built for certain things," Beverly said. Her voice was warm, almost kind. "And some people are built for others. There's no shame in that." She said the house would be transitioning back to the family. She said she was giving Jordan until the end of the month to find other arrangements, out of respect, out of generosity, because she had always liked him fine. Then she nodded at Preston. Preston slid the folder across the table. Jordan looked at it without touching it for a moment. Then he opened it. Inside was a single sheet with a number printed at the top and a check paper clipped to the corner. $8,000. The memo line read, "Transition Assistance." Jordan looked at the check. He looked at Diane. She was studying the table in front of her, her hands in her lap. She did not look up. He looked back at the check. $8,000 for his inconvenience. He picked it up. He held it for 3 or 4 seconds, long enough to look at it, really look at it, and then he set it back down on top of the folder. He closed the folder. "I appreciate you laying this out, clearly," he said. His voice was steady. I'll need a few days to make arrangements. Beverly smiled the way someone smiles when a negotiation goes exactly as expected. Of course. Take the time you need. Jordan pushed back his chair and stood up. He looked at Beverly. Thank you for the food. He looked at Preston, who gave him a short nod. He looked at Diane last. She still would not meet his eyes. He walked to the front door, picked up his jacket from the hook in the entryway, and stepped outside. He sat in his car for a moment. The heat was off. He could see his own breath. The check was still on the table inside. He had not taken it. He started the car and drove to Andre's office. Andre was already there when Jordan walked in. Desk lamp on, jacket off, a yellow legal pad in front of him. Jordan sat down across from him. We moved to Phase 1 tonight. Jordan was up before sunrise. He did not make breakfast. He did not linger. He moved through the house the way he moved through most things, quietly, with a clear sense of what mattered and what didn't. He started in the bedroom. 2 duffel bags, clothes, shoes, the small cedar box on the nightstand that held his watch collection, and his grandmother's ring. He did not take anything that was shared. Not the art on the walls, not the throw blanket on the chair, not the coffee maker Diane had picked out at a store on Michigan Avenue 2 Christmases ago. Those things stayed. He wanted only what was his. In the hallway, he stopped at the small framed photograph hanging near the coat hooks. His grandmother, Vera Wells, standing in front of a narrow brick house on Calumet Avenue. She was maybe 50 in the photo, though she looked younger. She was squinting into the sun and almost smiling, the way people smiled when cameras made them self-conscious. He had carried that photograph through every apartment he had ever lived in. He took it off the wall and wrapped it carefully in a clean T-shirt and set it on top of the second bag. He was out of the house by 7:15. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a 6-unit building on Mercer Street, 4 blocks east of Callaway. Jordan had purchased the building 3 years ago through a Delaware LLC called Ardmore Capital Group. Unit 3B had been sitting vacant for 2 months. The previous tenant moved to be closer to family, and Jordan had not rushed to fill it. It was a good apartment. High ceilings, original plaster walls, windows that caught the morning light, furnished simply with pieces Jordan had sourced over the years for exactly this kind of use. Solid, clean, nothing excessive. A bed, a desk, a kitchen that worked. He set his bags down by the door. He hung his grandmother's photograph on the wall beside the window, where the light was good. He stood back and looked at it for a moment. Then he unpacked. Diane texted at 9:47, just checking in. Hope the move wasn't too much this morning. Jordan read it standing at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee. He thought about the way she had studied the table during Beverly's speech, the way she had not looked at him when he picked up that check. He typed back, "All good. Settled faster than I expected. Hope you have a good day." 3 dots appeared. Then they disappeared. Then, after a pause, "Okay. Take care of yourself." He set the phone face down on the counter and finished his coffee. Andre called at noon. "Preliminary filings are done," he said. "All 9 properties. Ownership of record is established with documentation going back to original acquisition. If anyone tries to run title again, there is no ambiguity." "Good. The Croft family attorney is going to have a very interesting week." Jordan looked out the window at the street below. A delivery truck was double-parked in front of the corner store. A woman with a stroller navigated around it without breaking stride. "Let him figure it out on his own timeline," Jordan said. "We don't need to speed that part up." "Understood." Andre paused. "Claudette has something for you. She was going to call but asked me to flag it first. I'll call her now." Claudette picked up on the second ring. "I found something in the investor activity records," she said. No preamble. That was Claudette's way. She moved straight to the information and left the framing to you. Preston Croft has been shopping a development package to outside investors. Specifically, he has been representing himself as someone with family-backed access to what he calls anchor properties on Callaway. He used that language in writing. I have the email chain. Jordan said nothing. He sat down at the desk. He used the addresses of at least 3 of your properties as part of the pitch, Claudette continued. Implied he could deliver them as part of a larger acquisition package. One investor group out of Indianapolis took him seriously. She paused. They wired him $40,000, a deposit against future deal terms. When? 6 weeks ago. Jordan looked at his grandmother's photograph on the wall. The afternoon light was coming through the window at a low angle now, catching the edge of the frame. He took $40,000, Jordan said, based on properties he doesn't own and cannot deliver. That is correct. And the investors don't know that yet. They're starting to ask questions. The title search Preston commissioned came back wrong, or right, depending on how you look at it. His people are getting nervous. Send me everything you have, Jordan said. The emails, the wire records, the title search results, all of it, already in your inbox. He spent the rest of the afternoon reading through it. Every page, every figure, every date. He read the email chain twice. Preston's words, family access, anchor properties, position to close, sat flat and deliberate on the screen. By evening, Jordan had added Claudette's full report to the file he was building on his desk. He called Andre back. The investor fraud, he said. We'll need that when the time comes. The notice went out on a Tuesday. Claudette handled it herself. She did not send it by email. She sent it by certified mail, return receipt requested, on Wellspring Holdings letterhead. Clean, formal, and completely without warmth. It arrived at the Calloway house on Thursday morning. Beverly called Diane at 11:04 a.m. Jordan knew the approximate time because Diane called him at 11:22, and he could still hear the shape of Beverly's panic underneath Diane's carefully managed calm. My mother got some kind of letter, Diane said, about the house, something about a lease agreement and an ownership review. She's very upset. A letter from who? Jordan asked. He was at his desk. He moved nothing. He did not change his voice. Some company. Wellspring Holdings. Have you ever heard of that name? Doesn't ring a bell, he said. What did the letter say exactly? Diane read it to him. He listened as if hearing it for the first time. That sounds like a legal matter, he said when she finished. Your mother should have her attorney look at it. Probably just needs someone to sort out the paperwork. A pause. You really think that's all it is? I think attorneys exist for exactly these situations, Jordan said pleasantly. Tell her not to worry until there's something to worry about. After he hung up, he leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he went back to work. Beverly's attorney called her back the following afternoon. Jordan did not witness that call. But Andre had a contact at the firm. Not inside information, just the ordinary professional awareness of people who moved in the same legal circles. And the readback reached Andre within 48 hours. The attorney had told Beverly, as carefully as a person could tell another person something this destabilizing, that there was no error in the Wellspring notice, that the property at her Calloway address was owned by a Delaware LLC called Wellspring Holdings, that it had been owned by Wellspring Holdings for 7 years, that Beverly's name did not appear on any deed, any title transfer, or any legal instrument connected to the property, that she had been an informal occupant, that she had no legal claim. Beverly, according to Andre's contact, had gone very quiet. Then she had asked the attorney what she should do. The attorney had told her she needed to either negotiate a formal lease with the property owner or begin planning to vacate within 30 days, per the notice. Beverly had thanked him and ended the call. Preston spent 3 days trying to find out who owned Wellspring Holdings. He started with a simple online search. Nothing useful. Then he paid a record service to pull the LLC registration documents from Delaware. What came back was the name of a registered agent, a corporate services firm in Wilmington that managed filings for thousands of entities. No individual name attached. No address beyond the agent's. no trail. He called the registered agent directly. They were polite and completely unhelpful, because that was their function. He tried a different angle, a contact he knew in local real estate circles who sometimes had information about who was behind which LLCs in the South Side market. That contact had never heard of Wellspring Holdings. Neither had the two other people Preston called after him. He found nothing. He told Beverly he was working on it. Diane chose a restaurant in the West Loop. Quiet place. Good light. The kind of spot that said, "I want this to feel civilized." She was already seated when Jordan arrived. She looked composed. She had dressed carefully. She smiled when she saw him, a smile that carried more effort than ease. They ordered. They made small talk about the neighborhood, about a restaurant they both remembered liking that had apparently closed. It was the conversation of two people who had decided in advance to be reasonable. Then Diane set down her fork and said, "I want to apologize for how things happened." Jordan looked at her. "The way my mother handled it, that wasn't how I would have done it." She paused. "But I do think she was right that we've been going in different directions for a while. I think we want different things." Jordan let her finish. He nodded slowly. "What do you think you're about to have, Diane?" he said. She blinked. "What do you mean? You said you want different things. I'm asking what you think your things are. What does the life look like?" She straightened slightly. "I'll be fine, Jordan. That's what I'm telling you. I'm going to be fine." He looked at her for a moment, her hands around her water glass, the careful set of her shoulders. "I know you will," he said. He smiled when he said it. It was a real smile, and it meant something she was not yet equipped to understand. He was back at his apartment by 2:30. He hung up his jacket. He stood at the window for a moment, watching the street below. Then he sat at his desk and called Andre. "What did you find on Victor Ashby?" Andre did not lead with softness. That was not his way. "Pull up your email," he said. "I just sent you a folder." Jordan opened his laptop. The folder was already there, organized the way Andre organized everything, which meant a person could find anything in it inside of 10 seconds. 4 subfolders, clearly labeled. Jordan clicked the first one. "The bank account was opened 18 months ago," Andre said. "Chase, her name only. The address on file is her sister's place in Hyde Park." Jordan looked at the opening documents. Diane's signature, her handwriting on the application, neat and familiar. And the deposits? Regular. First of the month, like clockwork. Amounts between $4,000 and $8,000. Victor Ashby's personal LLC is the source. A company called AVX Consulting Group. She's listed as an independent contractor. Jordan said nothing. "Jordan, those are not consulting fees." "I know what they are," Jordan said quietly. He clicked the second subfolder. Transaction history, printed clean, each row dated. He scanned down the column of numbers. 18 months. Not once had the deposit stopped. Not during holidays. Not during the weeks he and Diane had taken a trip to New Orleans 2 summers ago. The last trip they had taken together that had felt like something real. He checked the date on the statement from that month. The deposit had come through on a Thursday. They had been on the riverboat tour. He moved to the third subfolder without saying anything. "Calendar cross-reference," Andre said. "I pulled her scheduling data through the civil matter. Lunch meetings, site visits, a conference in Indianapolis she said was work-related. I matched them against the transaction dates and against Ashby's known property activity in the market. The pattern was immediate. Every time Victor had a site visit, a meeting, or a significant transaction in the South Side corridor, Diane's calendar showed a corresponding entry. Not always explicit. Some were labeled lunch, some were labeled client. One was labeled dentist. 2 years, Jordan said. At minimum. The account is only 18 months old, but the calendar data goes back 26 months. She covered her tracks reasonably well. Andre paused. Not well enough. Jordan turned to the fourth subfolder. The first document inside was a deal memo from AVX Consulting Group, Victor Ashby's firm, outlining a proposed acquisition and redevelopment of the Callaway Avenue residential property. It was dated 11 months ago. The property description matched the house exactly. The seller of record was listed as the Croft Family Trust. The memo referenced a point of contact who had provided interior access and property details to support the acquisition analysis. The point of contact was listed as D. Wells. Jordan read that line twice. Then he closed the laptop. He sat at his kitchen table and looked at the wall, not at anything in particular, just at the flat, neutral surface of it. The room was quiet. The refrigerator made a low hum. Somewhere outside, a car passed on the street below, and the sound faded. He had built the portfolio for 11 years. He had been careful and patient and deliberate about every decision, every structure, every property. He had kept it private not because he was ashamed of it, but because privacy was protection. Protection against exactly the kind of thing that people do when they think they know the full shape of what you have. He had trusted Diane with things he had never trusted anyone else with. Not the portfolio. He had never disclosed the full scope of that, but the ordinary, unguarded things, the habits of a life shared. The version of himself that didn't calculate. She had taken that access and drawn a map with it. He sat for several minutes. Then he stood up, went to the kitchen, and made coffee. He stood at the counter while the machine ran. He poured a cup. He drank some of it. He looked out the window at the empty street. Then he picked up his phone and called Andre back. "I want to move to the final phase." "Divorce filing is ready," Andre said. "I've had it prepared for 10 days. I just need your authorization." "You have it." Andre was quiet for one beat. "Okay. It'll be filed by end of day. One more thing." Jordan set his coffee cup down. "Call Claudette. Tell her I need a complete portfolio presentation, every title document, every LLC registration across all 9 Callaway properties, everything organized and printed clean. I want it ready for a single meeting. How soon? However long it takes to do it right." "Give her 3 days," Andre said. "She'll have it perfect." 3 days is fine." Jordan paused. "I want you to reach out to Diane. Tell her I'd like to have a meeting with the family. Tell her I've had some time to think, and I want to clear up the property confusion in person." He kept his voice even. "Frame it like I'm coming to negotiate." Andre was quiet for a moment. Jordan could hear him writing something down. "And what do I tell her if she asks, 'What changed your mind?'" Jordan looked at the window, at the reflection of the kitchen light in the dark glass. "Tell her I finally understand the full picture," he said. The morning was cold and clear. Jordan parked on the south end of Callaway Avenue and got out of the car. He put his hands in his jacket pockets and walked. The block was quiet at this hour. A delivery truck idled halfway down the street. A woman walked a small dog past the nail salon. The trees that lined the sidewalk had lost most of their leaves, and the light came through the bare branches in thin, pale strips. He walked past the coffee shop first. The lights inside were already on. He could see the counter staff moving around, pulling chairs off tables, starting the machines. The smell of coffee drifted out when someone opened the door from inside. He had signed the lease for that space 6 years ago. A 2-page document, straightforward, filed cleanly with Claudette's office. The woman behind the counter had no idea who owned the building she worked in. Neither had Beverly. All those Tuesday mornings she sat at the window table with her church friends. He kept walking. The nail salon had a small handwritten sign in the window, advertising a holiday special. The lights were off, still closed for the morning. Jordan had owned that building for 8 years. He remembered the inspection, a cracked foundation on the east wall that had taken 3 months to repair properly. He had done it right, even though doing it cheaper would have been easy. He always did it right. The parking structure was next. 4 levels, 42 spaces, a small management office on the ground floor. Preston's car had been in space 18, Monday through Friday, for the past 2 years. Preston had never once wondered who owned the structure, had never thought to ask. Jordan stopped at the entrance for a moment, looked up at the concrete face of the building. Then he walked on. The commercial building at the end of the block was the largest structure he owned on Callaway. Ground floor hosted 3 tenants, a small insurance office, a tax preparation firm, and the room Beverly's church auxiliary rented every Thursday. Upper floors were storage and administrative space, currently underutilized. Jordan had plans for it, had always had plans for it. He stopped on the sidewalk in front of the building and looked at it. He thought about his grandmother, her house, 3 miles from here. The day they came and the paper said the house wasn't hers, and nobody in the room disputed it because the paper was the only thing that mattered. And she hadn't owned the paper. He had been 17 years old. He had stood in that living room and understood something so clearly it had never left him. He looked at the building for another moment. Then he walked back to his car, picked up the folder from the passenger seat, and drove to the meeting. Claudette was already in the room when Jordan arrived. She had chosen a seat on the right side of the table toward the end, with a leather portfolio in front of her and a pen placed neatly across the top of it. She looked up when Jordan walked in and gave him a small, single nod. He nodded back. The room was plain. A long folding table, 8 chairs, fluorescent lights, a whiteboard on the wall with old marker notes no one had fully erased. It smelled like folding chairs and old coffee. Beverly's auxiliary group had decorated one corner with a small framed piece of scripture and a plastic plant. Beverly arrived 2 minutes later with Preston at her side. She stopped when she saw Claudette. "Who is this?" Beverly said. She was looking at Jordan, not at Claudette. "My property manager," Jordan said. "She handles the operational side of my real estate holding. I wanted her here for accuracy." Beverly's eyes moved to Claudette and then back to Jordan. Her expression said she did not appreciate the addition and that she considered it a small power play from a man she still believed had no power to play with. "Fine," she said, and sat at the head of the table. Preston sat beside his mother. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too large across the shoulders, and he had the specific energy of a man who had not slept well. His eyes moved to the folder in front of Jordan, then away, then back. Diane came in last. She sat across from Jordan, 2 seats down from Beverly. She had dressed carefully, pressed blouse, hair done, the composed version of herself she put on when she wanted to feel in control of a room. She looked at Jordan with an expression that was almost warm, almost apologetic, almost something. He recognized the look. She was expecting him to open with a number. Jordan waited until everyone settled. Then he opened the folder. "I want to start by thanking everyone for coming," he said. His voice was calm, conversational. "I know there has been some confusion about the properties on Callaway Avenue, and I think the clearest way to resolve it is to just go through the documentation together." He pulled the first document from the folder and set it flat on the table. "The house on Callaway, the one where we lived, Beverly, and where you've been spending most of your time, is owned by Wellspring Holdings, LLC. He turned the title document so the table could read it. "This is the deed. Wellspring Holdings is wholly owned by J.R. Property Partners." He set a second page beside the first. "J.R. Property Partners is registered to me." Beverly's chin lifted. "Jordan, there is no error," he said. He wasn't unkind about it. He was simply certain. "I have owned that property for 7 years." He pulled the next document. "The building we're sitting in right now." He placed the title on the table. "Mine." He pulled another. "The coffee shop where you have your Tuesday mornings, Beverly." He set it down. "Mine." Another. "The parking structure where you park every day, Preston." He looked at Preston directly when he said it. Preston's jaw tightened. "Mine." Another. "The residential units above the nail salon." He placed the last of the title documents in a clean row across the table, each one labeled, each one clear. 9 properties, 12 on the block total. I own 9 of them. The room was silent. Preston's mouth opened. You're a project manager. You can't. I find that's a useful thing for people to believe, Jordan said. He wasn't smiling exactly, but there was something in his voice that was close to it. He let the silence hold for one full breath. Then he turned to Preston. The investor group that advanced you $40,000 based on your representations about access to anchor properties on this block, properties you implied you controlled, has already retained counsel. He set a single page in front of Preston. Claudette provided their attorneys with the documentation of your actual ownership position on Callaway, which is none. They'll be in touch. Preston's face went the color of dry concrete. Jordan turned to Diane. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. She had gone very still. I know about Victor, he said. I know about the account at the Hyde Park address. I know it's been 2 years. And I know that the deal memo from AVX Consulting Group lists you as the point of contact who provided interior access to the Callaway house for the acquisition analysis. He placed the financial records in front of her. The transaction history, the calendar cross-reference, the deal memo with her name on it. Diane looked at the documents. She did not pick them up. You weren't leaving a bad marriage, Jordan said. You were delivering an asset. He slid the last document across the table. Divorce papers. Filed. Diane's eyes moved to the document. She blinked once. Her throat moved. Jordan looked at Beverly last. Beverly was sitting very straight in her chair. Her hands were folded on the table. The authority she had carried into every room for 62 years was still in her posture, but something underneath it had shifted. Some quiet structural thing, like a wall that looks fine from the outside and is already failing inside. Jordan held her gaze. He closed the folder. I never needed to be known, he said. I built what I built, brought it into this family, and you looked at me and saw someone you could take from. He paused. That is the last mistake you will make at my expense. He stood. Claudette closed her leather portfolio, capped her pen, and rose from her chair without a word. Jordan picked up the folder. He walked to the door. Claudette followed, one step behind, unhurried. The door closed behind them. Beverly's attorney called at 8:47 in the morning. She was still in her robe. She had slept badly. The kind of bad sleep where you keep waking up hoping the thing you're dreading was a dream. And it never is. She answered on the second ring because Beverly Croft had always answered her phone quickly. It was a control thing. It meant you were ready. It meant nothing had gotten the jump on you. The attorney's name was Gerald Pruitt. She had used him for 20 years. He was careful and measured, and had never once delivered news that made her feel small. Until now. He told her the Wellspring Holdings notice was legally binding. He told her the ownership records were clean, 7 years of continuous, uncontested title. He told her that her occupancy of the Callaway house had no legal foundation, no deed in her name, no lease, no written agreement of any kind. She had been living in the property as an informal occupant, which in practical terms meant month to month at the owner's discretion, which meant she had essentially no rights the owner was obligated to honor. Gerald. Her voice was tight. There has to be something. Beverly. He paused. There isn't. The formal lease agreement, market rate, 30-day deadline to sign or vacate, had already been prepared by Claudette's office and was being mailed that morning. Gerald had already reviewed the rate. It was fair for the market. It was not something Beverly could afford. Not even close. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long time after Gerald said goodbye. The kitchen was quiet. The light coming through the window was the flat white light of early morning, and it landed on the counters, the cabinets, the table where she had sat every Sunday like a woman who owned something, because she had believed she did. She had told herself the story so many times. How she had secured this house for Diane. How she had always provided. How her children had never lacked for anything because of her. That it had become more real to her than any deed ever could have been. And Jordan had let her believe it. All 6 years. He had carried dishes and laughed at jokes and said yes, ma'am, and never once corrected her, because he didn't need to. He already owned the paper. She pressed her lips together, folded her robe tighter. Within 2 weeks, Beverly had arranged to move her things into her sister Paulette's spare bedroom in Gary, Indiana. She told people she was simplifying. She said the house was too much to maintain alone. She said it with the same authority she brought to everything, and most people accepted it because Beverly's confidence had always been convincing. It was her greatest and most exhausting talent. She told no one the real reason. Not one person. Preston's phone started ringing on a Tuesday. It was the investor group's attorney, a firm out of the loop that specialized, as the partner made clear on the first call, in commercial fraud recovery. They were not interested in a long conversation. They had the documentation Claudette had provided. They had Preston's emails to the investor group. They had the meeting notes where Preston had described himself as having family-connected access to anchor properties on Callaway Avenue. The civil suit was filed within 2 weeks of the confrontation. Preston's own attorney, a guy he'd used for contract work who had never handled litigation this serious, told him plainly, settle. The misrepresentation was documented. The damages were clear. Fighting it would cost more than paying it. Preston settled. The settlement wiped out the last of the money Beverly had given him over the years. The business investments she had funded quietly, each one framed as a loan and treated as a gift, because Beverly's love for Preston had always been expressed through her wallet. There was nothing left to draw from now. The well was empty, and the pump was in Gary. Victor Ashby's boutique development firm had been CC'd on enough of the civil proceedings that their association with Preston became visible to people they did not want seeing it. Victor was image-conscious the way all developers with investor relationships have to be. He cut Preston loose without a phone call. Just a brief email from his assistant citing a strategic shift in partnership priorities. Preston did not respond to the email. Diane's divorce attorney called Andre on a Thursday morning. The conversation was brief. The prenuptial agreement Jordan had quietly insisted on before the wedding, the one Diane had signed at the kitchen table 6 years ago, while telling herself it was a formality, while telling herself a man like Jordan had nothing worth protecting, was clean. Airtight, Andre said later. One of the tidier documents he had written in his career, which was saying something. The settlement was exactly what the agreement specified. Diane's personal belongings, her car, 1 year of transitional support, paid monthly, no extensions, nothing more. The rental apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building in Hyde Park. It was a fine apartment. Clean, decent light, quiet neighbors. Diane had furnished it quickly, practically, because she was good at making spaces look like something. She sat at the small table near the window on a Friday evening, with her phone face up in front of her. Victor had not called. She had sent 2 texts in the past 10 days. The first had gone unread for 36 hours, then received a short reply about being swamped with a closing. The second had not been answered at all. She looked at the screen. The light outside was fading. Her phone stayed quiet. The mornings came easy now. Jordan left the brownstone at 7, before the street noise picked up, when the air still had that clean early fall bite to it. 4 blocks. Same route, every time. He walked like a man who had nowhere urgent to be, and knew exactly where he was going. He turned onto Callaway just as the coffee shop was opening. He could smell it before he saw it. Dark roast and something sweet. Maybe cornbread, or the banana bread Renata sometimes put out on Friday mornings. She had been baking since before she had a kitchen worth baking in. 8 years running a catering operation out of a house 2 streets over. doing church repasts and family reunions and graduations, feeding people out of deep habit and deeper love. Jordan had watched her work for 3 of those years before he ever said a word to her about the storefront. He had waited until he was sure she was ready. He had waited until he was sure she wanted it. The sign above the door read, Renata's, in clean black lettering. Simple. No flourishes. She had designed it herself on the second meeting, slid the sketch across the table, and looked at him like she was daring him to suggest something different. He hadn't. He just said, "That's the one." Through the window he could see 6 tables occupied and a line of 4 people at the counter. A Tuesday morning. The place had been open for 11 months. He walked on. The commercial building in the middle of the block had its ground floor retail open now. A natural hair salon, a bookshop the size of a large closet that somehow always had exactly what you were looking for, and a framing shop run by a man named Douglas, who had lived on Calloway for 30 years and had strong opinions about matting. The upper floors were the artist studios, 16 units, below market. Applications reviewed through a lottery weighted toward neighborhood residents and working artists who had been priced out of spaces elsewhere in the city. The ribbon cutting had been 6 months ago. The community board chair had read Jordan's name from a printed acknowledgement card, and the small crowd had applauded, and Jordan had said, "Thank you," and left before the catered portion. Claudette had stayed. She told him afterward that people had asked about him, curious, and that she had said only that he was a private man who cared about the block. That was enough. That was more than enough. He passed the parking structure. He passed the nail salon building, the units above it fully occupied. He walked the length of Calloway the way he had walked it for years, noting what needed attention, what was holding, what was thriving, and did not think about the Crofts. He had not thought about them in a long time. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, not with much of anything. They had done what they had done, and the consequence had been accurate, and that was finished. He thought instead about the property on Morrow Street that Claudette had flagged last week. A 4-flat, aging but solid, in a part of the neighborhood that reminded him of what Calloway looked like a decade ago. He thought about who might be right for it, what it could become, how long it would take to get it there. These were the thoughts that occupied him now. These were the good ones. The brownstone felt like his in a way the Calloway house never quite had, which he understood now was because he had always shared that house with what other people believed about it. This one was just his. André had helped him pick out the light fixtures in the kitchen, which had turned into a 2-hour argument both of them had enjoyed. Claudette came to Sunday dinners occasionally and sat at the table with the focused pleasure of someone who spent all week solving problems and genuinely liked having nowhere to be for a few hours. They ate well. They talked about the work. It was the best version of things. His world was smaller than it had been a year and a half ago. He was aware of that. He was also aware, in the clear-eyed way that follows a real loss, that smaller had turned out to mean better in almost every direction that mattered. He came around the curve of the block and slowed. There was a moving truck idling in front of the Calloway house, the kind you rent yourself and drive carefully because you don't want to be responsible for the mirror. The back was open, and a man was carrying a lamp up the front walk, while a woman in scrubs directed him with one hand and held a box with the other. Young, early 30s maybe. She moved with the efficient confidence of someone used to being on her feet. Jordan stopped on the sidewalk. The man set the lamp down on the porch and turned back toward the truck. He noticed Jordan and gave the small nod that strangers on a block exchange when they're not sure yet whether they're neighbors. Jordan nodded back. "Moving in?" "Yeah." The man wiped his hands on his jeans and stepped down from the porch. "Just today and tomorrow, if my back holds out." He smiled. "I'm Marcus Hale. Jordan Wells." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. He looked at Jordan for a beat, then said, "Wait, Wells? Like Wellspring Holdings? That's right. Marcus blinked. You're the owner? Jordan reached out and shook his hand. Welcome to Callaway, he said. He walked on. Q, I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.